Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
I want to give a big shout out to the people who helped sponsor this event. We have created Light Ministries who played a part in helping us get this event. We have Disco100 Radio who helped us play a part. We have a group called ROEL ROY out of Paulding County who helped us get along this event. We have Count Me In Group slash Cobb County Pastors Alliance. And of course, we have BlackPush and NubiCorp. And before we start off with the questions, I want to just remember too that we just had a big event that happened here in Atlanta. On March 16th, we had 8 people who were killed, who lost their life tragically of no fault of their own. So for me personally, I would not want to start this show off without having like a 10-second moment of silence for those who died this week. So we're going to start there. All right, everybody. So we're going to talk about 4 different topics today. The first one is going to be criminal justice reform and mental health. Then we'll also talk about voter suppression, education, and community engagement. There will be no surprises here. There'll be, like I said, there'll be a point where people from the community will be allowed to ask questions as well. But we're going to jump right into it. And we're going to kick off with criminal justice reform. So one of the things that we know is that BlackPush is a nonprofit organization that works tirelessly with criminal justice reform, different things. We actually have partnered with a group called Powerhouse Enrichment Center down in South Clayton, where we just opened up our first men's shelter. And I wanted to start off, and I'm going to throw this question starting off to Gabriel, because Gabriel, you're representing today Park Cannon. So one of the questions we have for you are, what are some of the bills that are currently going through the House, the Georgia House, to help address criminal justice reform, or are there even any bills at all that are helping criminal justice reform?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for having me on. I appreciate you. So actually, one of the main things that we've seen going through the House, it already passed the House, it's currently in the Senate, the state Senate, is House Bill 286. In our view, I would say this is not a great bill for our communities here in Georgia. What this bill does is that it does not allow for local municipalities to or counties to defund their polices by more than 5%. So one of the problems with this is that we believe that local power and local control of their own budgets, each community. The reason we have local governments in the first place is that each community knows what is best for their own communities and what they should invest in. And so restricting this across the board and a random number like 5% seems very restrictive and seems like a huge power grab from the state government in this specific regard. And one of the things about, this whole controversy around defunding the police in general is that defunding the police does not mean that we want to get rid of the police. We need public safety. We need our police force as much as everything else. But one of the things is that a thing we like to say a lot is that your budget shows your priorities, right? So if you prioritize education, if you prioritize healthcare, if you prioritize community investment, helping people create small businesses or finding employment, then we have to show that in our budgets. And so one of the things that we see study after study shows is that, sources of crime comes from things like poverty and their communities struggling. So the solution to crime isn't necessarily more policing. It's funding, investing in our communities by supporting them in education and in healthcare, and in making sure that they can actually make a living. So the solution to crime isn't necessarily more it's so funding. I think we need to reflect that more in our budgets, communities, on the local level, the federal level, and this bill severely restricts that. And I think it's a very dangerous bill, and we are working very hard in our office to ensure that we can stop. I think we need to reflect that more in our budgets. It will have a detriment to the community, federal level, and this bill severely restricts that. And I think it's a very dangerous bill. And that's the main bill that we have in our office to ensure that we can stop this bill from passing to the communities in Georgia if we let this bill pass. Severely restricts that. And I think
use the term. So that's interesting because that kind of
that
Kill the
I know
fake.
about in the state house. And
So, because we actually use the So real
term
quick, I mean, I defund wanna kinda police shift a because lot, you said right? something that was And I kind of think that important. this is a part where And we we want to kind of use the bring term in interesting Sheriff because, like, Owens, and we have Colonel Hunton. Because one of the things that I had for you guys is that, like, how can So, we 'cause we actually make use sure that we have a
the term
system in
defund
place? Because
police a
both of you
lot,
guys are
right?
in charge And I of think that this jails, is a and you
part
guys
where
are
we
in
wanna
charge of
kinda
making
bring
sure
in
that we
Sheriff
keep
Owens,
people
and we
safe
have
while they're in
Colonel
jail.
Hunton.
Make sure that 'Cause one we're
of the things
locking
that I
people
had
up
for
who
you
deserve to
guys
be
is
locked
that,
up. But
like,
at the same time, how can we make sure that we're rehabilitating those who need to be rehabilitated, putting systems in place for them when they go to jail, so that they're not just going to jail, sitting there waiting to go to court, then they come back out, and then there's nothing. And at the same time, how do we do that at the same cost of keeping them safe while they're locked up? And I'll start with you, Sheriff Owens.
All right, but again, thank y'all for having me on today. Great question. You know, I think from my perspective, my job is to send anyone that comes in our facility, hopefully send them out better where they can. So, you know, if you're defunding me and taking money away from me, allowing me doing that, then that creates a problem. You know, as the new sheriff in Cobb, we want to create programs for to betterment of our detainees. We want to create some educational prospects for them going forward, as well as job opportunities. We're partnership with some local businesses within Cobb to allow them to have those opportunities, as well as we're talking with the Urban League, going to partnership with them to also come in and give us some high school training, education training, GED training, as well as family life skills training. So our customers, for lack of a better term, 25, and a lot of them have young kids and don't know how to be parents. So we're gonna get them a training they need. But by defunding us, taking these opportunities away from us is, for me, is detrimental. You know, I imagine probably the same for Colonel Hunt. Majority of our budget goes toward our detention centers, and as well as our medical care that we provide for them. That's the bulk of our budget. So, and in my opinion, we can't afford to lose any of that, because then that takes away from the services we provide for them while they're in our custody, care, and control. So there are some things that we're doing to try to help them to go out better than they came in, but defunding for us will be detrimental in that area.
And Colonel Hutton, I know you had an opinion on it as well.
Yes, sir. The one of the biggest problems that we have with, and I can only speak for Paulding County because that's where I've been my entire career, and I've lived here the majority of my life since I was a little bitty fella. But with our facility being primarily a pretrial facility, we do provide services. We have Celebrate Recovery that comes in and works with them. However, that has been affected due to the COVID pandemic and everything. We're actually putting some stuff in place to try to get them back in for us. But we also work with a lot of rehabs, things of that nature, so that we can try to get them the resources that they need when they get out, because they're not staying with us that long. So since we're mainly priority a pretrial facility, they're not with us that long. So, you know, in the past, I was the jail administrator for 4.5 years. I started to bring in and do a GED program. And one of the problems that I had there was that they weren't there long enough to complete the program. So, and a lot of them, there was a few, but a lot of them would not follow up once they got out of the facility and finished their GED. So we're trying to focus on, for us, is resources in the county and surrounding us that they can reach out to when they get out. And we're pushing a lot of that to them through the inmate information system that we have in place now. So rehabs, job opportunities, things of that nature.
So, and that goes with another question. So one of the questions that has been, and I think Attorney Griggs may want to jump in on this. One of the things that's been really interesting, and the things that we've been finding out, is that even in the way we transport inmates, we have not done a fair job at it. We can go back a couple of years ago. There was an inmate down in I think it was, we're looking at Maryland, where they took a person into custody, and he was sitting in the back of a paddy wagon, is what they call it. The term is, and they didn't have any seatbelts in it. The person ended up dying because they ended up getting flipped around in the back of the paddy wagon. What are some of the things that, from your perspectives, from Colonel Hunting's perspective, some of the things that you guys do in Sheriff Owens to kind of make sure that even when they're in your custody, right? Because we know, I personally believe that everybody's innocent until proven guilty. If we lose that system, then we lose our whole justice system, right? What is it that you guys are doing to make sure that we protect them while they're in the custody? Because at the end of the day, even though they're locked up, they have rights as well, right? They have a right to be heard, and they have a right to have their day in court, where they'll see somebody like a Judge Angela Brown, and deal with somebody like DA Brody or DA Patson. But they have their right, or DA Gatson, I'm so sorry. But they have their right and they have their time. What is it that we're doing on that part to make sure that we're protecting them while they're actually in custody?
One of the things that we did, Sean, was with our new facility that we just moved into in May of 2020, started in May and then continued through June, was we don't transport inmates to court anymore. We have a connecting corridor to the courthouse, so we can walk them to the courtroom. When the pandemic hit, we've been doing court via the computer like we're doing tonight. So with using different systems to be able to facilitate that, to try to protect that inmate population. Again, we want to make sure that they're as safe as they possibly can be while they're in our custody. That incident that you were talking about, our sheriff's office, we don't have paddy wagons like that. We have some vans that we use that are outfitted a little bit different than what most people see on TV and things of that nature. A big paddy wagon with a cage and just a long bench in it. So there are those safeguards out there. I did want to, I hate to go back, but one of the things that Sheriff Owens was talking about as far as defunding, that is the biggest priority budgetary wise, is for the jails. It costs a lot of money to house people and to take care of them to the best of their abilities. We've gone to the extent, and I'm sure Sheriff Owens has become aware of this since being elected, but we're having to run mental health in our own facilities because of the mental health facilities that were closed down in the state. So we've had to hire mental health people to come in our facility and provide services for people that even myself and my staff at the sheriff's office feel like they don't belong in jail, but there's no services out there. There's nowhere else for us to take them. So for their own safety, for their family's safety, something's got to be done. And in 2012, when I was the jail administrator, overnight, when they closed the mental health facilities, the state of Georgia's jails turned into mental health facilities overnight, snap of a finger. And it was a crazy time. And I've been fighting that since 2012. We need mental health facilities to help people out, whether it's, the good Lord made them that way, or if it's because of choices that they made in life that has made them become that way. They still need those services to get that help that they need to protect them and their families.
Sheriff Owens.
Yeah, well, great point, Colonel. I'll definitely touch on that again shortly. But just to answer the question regarding transportation, I'm kind of glad you brought it up. So at Cobb County, we're very fortunate this year, as I'm coming in office as your newly elected sheriff, that we're going to purchase all new transport vehicles, probably in excess of maybe $700,000 to $1 million to replace all our outdated vehicles. So we're in the process of doing that now. So our vehicles will be the most latest and updated with seat belts and proper safety gear in each one of those vehicles going forward. And my fleet may be a little larger than Colonel Hunt's. I would admit that. So I have buses, sprinter vans, handicap vehicles, some paddy wagon type style vehicles as well. So I have a whole fleet of transport because we pick up a lot over the state of Georgia, and also we go out of the state to pick up as well. So I have a pretty robust fleet, but that fleet will be all new coming in the next couple of months. We're placing orders now for new vehicles, which should be the best ones on the in the production line, hopefully coming out and have the most latest and greatest safety features. Colonel Hunt spoke on something that's very important regarding mental health care. That's extremely important.
All right, everybody, we
that's-
are live. I just wanted to kind of start off by just saying thank you guys for being. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I thought I heard someone else talking.
That was some technical issues here. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just gonna say about mental health real quickly. I know we want to move on, but it's extremely important. That is not where individuals should be who have those type of issues. That's not what we're trained to do. But as you know, that is a huge part of our budget, taking care of our medical cost. You know, in excess, I'll just say millions of dollars in cost for medical treatment and services that we provide on a 24-hour basis. So that is something that we definitely look into. And he is absolutely right. They changed/closed a lot of facilities throughout the state. Now those individuals are being brought to our facilities to treat, for lack of better terms, and keep them in custody, which is where they should not be. So I would hope we reach out to our state reps and have them propose a bill to reopen some of these mental health care facilities that they closed down several years ago, so we can get these individuals the proper care they need. And of course, being locked up is not where they should be. They should be in a facility that's going to get them the proper mental health care they need. And they won't get that in neither one of our facilities.
And since we're talking about mental health, I have somebody on the line who, if you guys have never met him, he is absolutely amazing. So he knows where I'm going. His name is Stephen George. And Stephen, one of the big questions I have for you was, so you deal with this every day. When I first met you down in Paulding County, it was something that you were passionate about. Does mental health impact our criminal justice system? Is it part of the reason why it's so inflated? And yeah, is it part of the reason why our criminal justice system is so inflated? It's a lot of people who are dealing with mental health issues.
Thank you, Sean. Again, Stephen George, DBHDD, Department of Behavioral Health, Developmental Disabilities. I'm the Region 1 Crisis Counselor. To answer your question, absolutely. First of all, I think it wouldn't be a stretch to say that probably in each and every county, your jail or your pretrial detention center is probably the largest mental health facility in that county. Having said that, it's also important that everyone understand that the state of Georgia is currently under supervision by the Department of Justice. Two of those unfunded and there's two unfunded mandates as a part of that decree. Beds, all kinds, emergency, transitional, permanent placement, and transportation and real access to wraparound services. And those are some of the key elements that I've been filling in throughout the pandemic. Some of the things I've done is I've been reaching out to some, say, non-traditional resources and plugging them into our mental health system. For example, the research is very clear in that up to 80% of people who are incarcerated or have interaction with the justice system are either functionally illiterate or have some sort of mental health condition, whether it be a substance abuse issue or some sort of intellectual disability. The research also shows that where wraparound services and support are implemented, that recidivism rates go down. And when recidivism rates go down, that means the costs of incarceration and managing people also go down. Besides that, I think it's the right thing to do. And again, we have resources currently available that all they have to do, they're there waiting to be leveraged. For example, for people returning from a felony sentence in the prison system, we have the reentry housing program through the Department of Community Affairs. People are coming out of the prison system from a felony conviction without a housing plan, or people under supervision by a felony accountability court can qualify for up to 6 months of transitional housing. In addition, there's the HUD 811 program for people 18 to 62 who have either a mental health or developmental disability issue, and that program will provide permanent supportive housing for people 18 to 62. Of special note, the state of Georgia is currently looking for providers. The reason there's not enough beds is we don't have enough providers providing the beds. Point in fact, there are no providers in Paulding County. There are no providers in Cobb County, and there are no providers in North Georgia.
Hey, so Stephen, I want to get Attorney Griggs and Attorney Mitchell on real quick. So one of the questions I had, and I know that I'm going to start with you, Mitchell, is that because I'm going to go right after this to DA Brody and DA Patsy, but I wanted to go to Attorney Griggs and Attorney Mitchell over here, and I have people yelling at me in the office here, so I'm just working my way around. One of the questions I had for you two is that you guys are defense attorneys. In your view, and if you wanted to add in anything to the topics that just went before, does the system provide the same justice for all people despite race, economic background, etc.? Like, is it equal? Do you think the system is equal? And I'll start with you, Attorney Mitchell.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. Great panel. I will answer your question about the equal justice, and but I wanted to briefly revisit the mental health system. First, I wanted to applaud Colonel Halton and Sheriff Owens on addressing mental health issues. This has been something that, as a defense attorney, has been a serious concern for me. If someone's identified with a crime briefly, they're charged with that crime. The DA has their mandate, which they have to do with to prosecute the crime. And then that person is maybe given an evaluation. If they're given an evaluation, the judge looks at that evaluation. Sometimes they're not identified as having an issue, and they go into the system. And then they're going to serve their sentences. They get in the jail system, and they still have problems. It was at that time. A lot of times I can talk to the sheriffs, I can talk to the people that have them, because they're like, just like the sheriff said, this guy shouldn't be here. This guy should be evaluated. So where am I going with this? At some point, we need to have some type of fail-safe in place where if it's identified afterwards, where you don't have to go through some long bureaucratic process to remedy that problem, where even the people that have incarcerated say, hey, DA Brody, this guy you might want to take another look at. We don't have, other than, and I'm not trying to revise the system, you have to go through the process and the person receives what's going on, and we have the separate divisions of the incarceration, the prosecution, and the judges. But there has to be some type of communication, some kind of open line. And I don't know if you guys have that in place, DA Brody, Judge Brown, or something in place, but we have to be able to fix it. If we see a problem, there has to be a way where we can fix it, other than the colonels and the sheriffs trying to fix it themselves by trying to go to other populations. They already have their monies, they have their ideas. We can show them. Me as a defense attorney, what can I do to help as well? But I just want to open the dialogue on that. And I'll turn it over to Attorney Griggs on that part.
Thank you, Attorney Mitchell, and thank you, Sean, for having me on this robust panel to have these important conversations. And I got to push back a little bit. I'll answer your first question. Do I believe that the system is fair and equal to all criminal defendants? Absolutely not. If you have the finances and the resources, you can help shape what the outcome of any criminal process, but absolutely not is a system fair and balanced for every single criminal defendant. And then to kind of go back to the conversation we were having about mental health and the jails being the biggest mental health provider, particularly the biggest mental health provider in the state is the Fulton County Jail. So I've definitely dealt with this, whether it's Fulton, DeKalb, Cobb, Paulding, Douglas, Lowndes, it's all the same issue. And that goes to the very issue that the protesters are out in the street for, and they're talking about defund. Now, I'm not the biggest absolute proponent of the defund movement, but I am the proponent of the reallocation movement, because that's exactly what they're talking about. They're talking about we need to reallocate funding that's going to the jail to provide mental health services to agencies that can do that outside of incarceration. And we have to remember, these are pretrial detention centers. So every single person that's in the pretrial detention center that's not under a sentence is presumed innocent. And so we have a real issue that we need to reevaluate how we do things in the system. And I think that's why it's incumbent upon our legislators to invite the other part of the system into the room to have this conversation. The district attorneys, the defense attorneys, of course, law enforcement, and then the community to talk about and reimagine what public safety really looks like. So when we get caught up in the buzzwords, oh, they're talking about defunding the police, which means they don't want any more police. That's not what they're saying. They're saying that they want to reimagine how the system works. And I think we can all agree, especially after coming out of a year-long pandemic, the system has to be fixed because it's not running efficiently and effectively for a majority of our community. So I think that's the real conversation, and it's a nuanced conversation. It's not really a partisan conversation. It is a bipartisan conversation that needs to be had, that we can look at funding where we can, maybe not quote defund, but reallocate to other parts of the system that are not working. We need to reallocate towards education. We need to reallocate towards housing. We need to reallocate towards mental health providers. We need to reallocate, and we need to focus on building the whole person and not just incarcerating and throwing away the key. So I think that Governor Deal was on the right path with criminal justice reform, but we got to go a little bit further. And I think that's the conversation that should be happening at the Gold Dome, and not partisan politics playing with the word, oh, we don't want to defund the police. Nobody's talking about abolition, even though there are activists out there that are firm proponents of abolition. I myself am not one of them, because I do understand that DA Brody and the DA in Gwinnett County, who I've not had the pleasure of meeting yet, hopefully I will, have a job to do. There are some people that are clearly in need to be incarcerated for long periods of time. But there's a difference between, and a DA told me this one time, it's the difference between the people we are scared of and the people we're just mad at. If you understand my logic there. I mean, people that commit crimes and are convicted of murder, rape, armed robbery, and all of those, they need to serve sentences. But there are other crimes or criminal behavior that we might need to reevaluate how we're treating people. We can't have the war on drugs, and we can't have the war on poverty, because it just creates more problems for our community. So I think that's the conversation, the nuanced conversation that the activists want to have. I think that, in their labeling of their activities, it's only so much you can put on a poster that says what you want to say. So I think that's the conversation we have to have. And
I want to bring in former Congressman Kwanzaa Hall, because I know he has to get off earlier than most of us. So you went down to you went to Washington. You worked in Washington, and just for those who don't know, Congressman Kwanzaa Hall actually took over the late John Lewis's seat when he passed away. He was appointed to that seat that we know is now being held by Congresswoman Nikema Williams. But Congressman Kwanzaa Hall, do you believe, from your perspective, that we need to do something on criminal justice reform, and not only on a state level, but on a national level? Do you believe there needs to be an adjustment there as well?
Absolutely. First, I want to say thank you to Push Black, and thank you to all of our friends and colleagues who are on the call, some elected officials, attorneys, as well as citizens from the community, our pastors. It's good to see all of us, taking our Saturdays, being willing to be a part of. I think everyone here is committed to figuring out a solution. I think the solutions come not only at a national level, but all the way down to the most local levels. And that's why we need to have a collective like we have on this call, working together to figure out how we can make some win-win-wins. I have been a proponent of justice reform, and I don't like to use the term criminal justice reform, because what we're trying to reform is the justice system. And if it's just, it means it's for everybody. If they make a mistake, and they have, paid their retribution, they should be allowed to enter back in society. Just as if you make a mistake as a child, you should be allowed back into your parents' home or into good graces. We all make mistakes. That being said, there have been measures introduced at the local level here in Metro Atlanta, at the state level, and at the national level, and by competing interests. I think, in general, we should be in a direction of making the system work more for everybody. And we have documents and statistics that prove that it is not working for people of color, primarily for Black men and Latino men. But in Atlanta and Metro Atlanta, it's mostly Black men, some poor whites who are feeling the brunt of this system. And it has been for over 100 years, So this is something that is proven. And so we've got to take the necessary steps. I introduced legislation, as many pieces as I could in the 33 days or so that I was there, about 6 pieces of legislation. And several of them spoke to restorative justice in a variety of capacities. And we have some measures that are, plethora of measures, thousands of bills that Congress members introduced that speak to various issues. And of that, probably 50 to 100 are related to justice reform in a variety of capacities. Many are from the more left side approach, but some are on the right, which are like the measures that were discussed earlier, what's happening at the state to try to roll back the positive measures that are on the books. I think all in all, we've got to reallocate resources that have been spent on just policing to prevention. We need mental illness dollars coming from the federal level. Everyone is taxed with that. Sometimes we get caught up in semantics and terms like defund and things like that really are non-starters. You can't tell my mom she don't want that you're not going to fund police officers in her neighborhood. But if you say you're going to use resources that otherwise, that dollar that we spend, we're going to spend 20% of it, 20 cents, on making sure the kids don't get in trouble by having activities in the community, she'll totally say, absolutely do that. So that's where we've got some semantic issues that are making it hard to have the conversation. And then we've got to have people like everyone on this call willing to be in the room, and let's have honest conversations about the facts that we all have in front of us to say, what are the things that we can agree upon and work in a collaborative fashion to, let's take 5 things we all agree on and take those and one by one, move that agenda forward. And that's really what I want to be a part of. I'm committed to working with you all on this call and bringing others to the call. Don't need too many people to come up with some great solutions. Attorney Gerald Griggs has been fighting the good fight for a long time and really been pushing the agenda. When I was a council member, he would come to City Hall and say, hey, Kwanzaa, Brother Hall, these two aren't right, and y'all got to fix these. He sued the city. So, we've been on both sides, but I've always kept a rapport with him and a relationship because we both really want to see the change happen because we feel it personally. As individuals, any one of us could be at the brunt of a cop who sees us and labels us incorrectly, as we've seen so many people killed and lose their lives at the hands of officers who, in the name of upholding the law, have not. But then we also have Black on Black crime in our communities that isn't in the same conversation, but it's something we can't leave out of the room because that's real.
Right.
And then when we talk about access to guns, that's a whole nother part of this. And then mental illness, and then homelessness, and then education. All of these things really are interrelated. I'm so thankful that you put at least 4 of them on the table. And I just want to suggest is that maybe we break up into, breakaway sessions on the next call, and we all take pieces before the call and say, what do we agree on, and actually work in earnest. Because I know Sheriff Craig Owens is a good brother. He's from Atlanta, went to Atlanta Public Schools, and has been elected in a historic manner to Cobb County. And I know he wants to do the best he can in his job to make the jail a pride and joy, and his work a pride and joy of not only the county, but of his family and of himself. So we're all here to do the best together. So I just want to be a part of that type of effort for the DAs who are on the call and the pastors. We all are doing the work, but let's try to collaborate and see if there's some win-wins that we can create, 1 or 2 or 3 items that we agree upon and move them forward of any other topics, because there's so many. But let's fight this elephant one piece at a time. And you have my commitment that I'll be here and be a part of it. Thanks for having me.
And I want to bring in, at this point, just so you guys know, I'm going to bring in DA Brody and I'm going to bring in DA Gatson, and followed by them, I'm going to bring in some of the spiritual leaders, because there's some questions for you too. Angela, Judge Brown, you are not, don't think that I see you over there. But DA Brody and DA Gatson, one of the things I really respect about you guys is you guys won your elections. I mean, you guys are elected officials. That's one thing that I think that's really interesting. Somebody I was speaking to the other day did not know the DA's office was an elected position, right? You guys are elected officials, and I think that's really important that we first put that out there. And at the same time, you guys have gone into systems that maybe you were used to, maybe you were not used to. And the question I have for you guys is justice fair, right? Because it's your job to enforce justice, right? To hold Lady Liberty up and to make sure that we weigh it out and to make sure that we weigh out when people do crimes. We make sure that they're held accountable to all the facts that's stated when they do crimes, that you guys are transparent. And at the same time, it's your job to make sure that when justice does roll down, you guys have the power to make recommendations to make sure that justice is fair. So the first question I had for both of you is justice fair? From your perspective, since you guys have been in office, because obviously your heart is one thing, but you guys have, 20 to 30 people who work under you, right? You can't control the hearts of everybody who work under you. And the second part of that question is some of the things we can do to make justice more equal for everybody. So a person who gets charged with the same crime, they're not being, one person is not getting 15 years for the same crime that somebody who got 5 years and they have the same record. It's justice fair, and how do we make it more equal?
I'll go ahead and start. Thank you for having me this evening. And I do appreciate the folks that are on this call, because I agree that we have to collaborate more and we have to come up with solutions. If justice was fair, I think the former DA would still be here. But I ran because I was hearing too much in the community about how it is not fair, and that our children are being caught up in the system and being churned out and their lives ruined. So no, justice is not fair, but I think that as a district attorney, that's what we have to work towards. And I was talking with someone this morning. These are things that we get in increments. Unfortunately, you want to come in office, you want to change everything overnight, but it's not going to change overnight. It's going to be a process that we have to go through. And how do we do it? We do it one bite of the elephant at a time, because this is not something that's going to be an easy and quick fix. It's going to take diligence from all parts of our community, not just the DA's office, but I think everyone has a hand in it to make sure that things are done better.
And just to chime in on that, first of all, thank you guys for doing this. It's a great panel that you have, and everybody has said some important things so far. Justice, in my mind, and the reason why I ran for district attorney is it's not fair. By minorities, it seems like there's been a second or separate justice system. And so the reason why I ran was because I had some ideas that I wanted to put in place, and the only way I could put those in place was if I was in charge. And my goal is to get us to stop focusing on punitive justice, but focus more on restorative justice for those people who we can return to the community as productive citizens. Like Mr. George said, those wraparound services are so important that as a community, we need to invest in those services, so that way when somebody does leave a jail sentence or does leave the detention center, that they have the ability to return back to the community as productive citizens. That's the only way we're going to reduce our recidivism rates and also allow our community to be even safer. The thing I saw most of all is that, we have a lot of people that come to court without attorneys. So for my office, the first thing that we're doing at their first appearance is making sure either they have an attorney or have the opportunity to get an attorney. And if they don't have an attorney when they come back to the court, we're going to get them assigned an attorney. And I think that is so important, because they need to have someone who can be an advocate for them, who knows the legal system. Someone like a Gerald Griggs, someone like a Mr. Mitchell here. Those people understand the criminal justice system, and they can help them navigate the criminal justice system. Because as a prosecutor, your goal is to basically to convict someone. But I want to change the mindset that instead of conviction, we're focusing on restoration. And the only way we can do that is by changing our mindset to know that what is good about this person? How can we bring them back to community as a productive citizen? Now, just like Attorney Griggs said, there are some people that we literally need to throw under the jail because they're just that cruel and mean. Yes, there are going to be some like that. And those people, that's how we're going to treat them. But for those nonviolent offenders, we should be trying to restore them back to the community so that way we can focus on the people who are going to bring harm to the community. And I think it's very important that no matter who they are, that they have legal representation to help them get through the legal system and then go forward from there. The only way we can do that is changing our mindset from punitive to restorative justice.
And this is where I wanted to bring in Judge Brown from, because we had a great
Good, 'cause I was
dialogue.
about to jump in.
We had a great dialogue when you were on my podcast. And I asked you the question, and I don't think a lot of people heard it, but I asked you the questions: what does fair justice look like from the bench? And you explained it in such a way I thought it was so prolific for me. Don't give me that face. You don't have anything to drink out of. You don't have a cup today. But you gave me. Oh, there it goes. I'm sorry. It's an inside joke, but you gave me such a. It's like it blew my mind what you said about what justice looks like from the bench, because we have different people. We have Attorney Griggs, we have Attorney Mitchell, who look at it from the perspective of the represented defense side. We have DA Brody, we have DA Gaston, who looks at it from the perspective of the victim side, right? But what does it look like from the bench? What does fair justice look like when you're on the other side and you're the one who makes that decision?
So everyone agrees the judge has a lot of power, right? I start from a place of power over people's lives from the moment they touch a base with me until the moment they move away. I think one thing, and this is what I wanted to jump in on, we keep talking about equal justice. We want to make equal justice. When we talk about race and its impact on the justice system, because there's criminal justice and there's civil justice, right? Don't forget about its impact upon, and race's impact upon that. But when we say equal justice, equal assumes that we are all starting from the same point. Equal assumes that you can treat people the same way because we're all at the same place. We don't need equal justice here. What we need is a systematic, equitable justice put in place. And the only way that can be done is when people of power are aware and made aware of different input, right? So I need to hear from the criminal defense attorneys because they have a particular view, right? I need to hear from the district attorney because they have a particular view. I need to hear from the pastors and the churches because I just view should look like and what it looks like in their community, as well as business people, as well as other governmental entities, so that when I make a decision, I have all the facts. Sometimes just the facts that are right in front of you are not the truth, are not the complete facts. And you are asking me to make a decision that impacts a person's life from that moment on, about what should be done. And I have to make that decision regardless of what anyone else thinks the right decision is. I feel like that is my mantle. That is what I have been called to do, is to impact a life and make sure that justice is equitable. I think we've all seen on Facebook, there's a cartoon of the kids who are looking over the fence at the baseball game, and it says equal justice means everybody gets the same box to stand on, same color, same size, same height. But if you're 2 feet tall and everyone else is 12 feet tall, their view and what they need to help them is much different than what it needs to be for you. And so that's something as judges, we have to be open to that view. Now, how do I get all those input views? I can't get it sitting in my courtroom all the time. I can't get it hanging out with other judges all the time. I can only get it if I, as an elected official, am out in my community so that I can hear the community voice, so that I can understand from youth what it feels like to walk down the street and have law enforcement stop you and talk to you. So I can understand from the senior citizens' view what it feels like to be in their community and the crime and what impacts them. So I can understand from a young, single African-American male parent what it feels like to have nobody believe that you have the ability and innate want to be a part of your child's life. I mean, I just think there's just so much more to justice than equal justice. It's not equal because everyone has not started from the same space. And if you were to just take a slice even now, everyone is not on the same starting point. And so you have to adjust what your sentences is. I know what your sentences are. I know the DA sees it. I'll give you an example. I had a case in front of me where the gentleman had been in the prison system for close to 7-8 years, served a sentence, went up on appeal. The appellate court says he was right. And so he got to have a new trial. And the DAs were able to work with him because there were some things that he actually, they felt that yes, on this crime, he actually did that crime. I'm not sure about that crime. And maybe the way it was looked at the first time wasn't correct, but they worked together to work out a plan and a plea for this young man. All right. They had DFACS worker come in and explain to me what all is available for this young man. They had his family come in and explain to me what the family was willing to do, how he was going to live with his uncle who was in Henry County, and what the plan was there. And then I had the victim witness, the victim and the victim's parent come in to tell me how that felt. So I'm able to, from all of that, decide, okay, this is what I think is going to happen. And then I asked the young man, well, how do you feel? What do you think I should do? And why do you think I should do it? Because I think so often we overlook the people in the criminal justice system. We overlook the parents who don't have attorneys. We don't hear what their voice is. We don't hear what their heart is. And for me, I feel like that is something that we as judges need to do more of. And then we need to take stock. I know it's a long answer. I apologize, but not really. We also need to take stock as judges and people in places of power. What's my implicit bias? I mean, I'm very proud of the fact that our bench took an implicit bias test willingly. We had some training, and more importantly, afterwards, we had conversation because there were some things that people didn't even realize they were doing. And so I think that it comes from so many different places, but it is a constant act of moving forward, a constant faith, but faith without what works is dead. You got to have some action. God asks us to take a step in faith towards something. So we need to keep moving towards it.
And this is where you actually you brought up a verse, so I'm going to go to the religious community on this one. I want to go with this one. I'm actually going to start with Pastor Purvis, and I'm actually going to ask this to Apostle Musser. So one of the things that's very interesting, our organization is called BlackPush, right? We promoted a video recently of just kind of saying like who we are, what it is that we stand for. And you would be surprised the responses that we got. One person even said to us earlier today, this morning when I woke up and I looked at it, they said, you guys are a neo-Nazi group. You're spilling out hate. Go back to where you came from. And that's literally on our Facebook page. Not even knowing anything about our organization, not even knowing what it is that we stand for. And for those who are on the panel who have gotten a chance to know me, I'm very unbiased. Like, I listen to all sides. I think D.A. Brody can say that. I mean, Attorney Griggs can say that. I listen to all sides. And if right is right and wrong is wrong, it's black and white for me, right? What is it that we can do, Pastor Purvis? What is it that we can do, Apostle Musser? Why is it that when we look at, and don't take this, please, I hope this doesn't come off the wrong way, but when we look at white Christianity and black Christianity, it seems like we're talking over each other instead of to each other. And even when we bring up the topic of Black Lives Matter, it seems like people go crazy, and they seem to think that because we say Black Lives Matter, that we're not saying all lives matter. No, but we're just saying it's. Somebody gave this great indication. It's like it's like a whole street of houses, right? and one house being on fire, we're not going to be focused on the other houses that are not on fire. We're going to focus on the house that is on fire, right? And we had our George Floyd moment.
Because all buildings matter.
All buildings matter. So what is it that from a spiritual standpoint, like, why is it that we're missing that? What is it that we're missing there? Why is it that we can't speak to each other and we're talking over each other? And that's for Apostle Musser and Pastor Purvis.
Yes, sir. Well, first of all, let me just thank you and the panel. I'm honored to be here with you guys. So many distinguished people with so many powerful voices and impact. I think part of the issue is there seems to be a disconnect when it comes to African Americans. That, you know, I think, and I don't think it's just other ethnicities either. I think it's even in our own community, there's a disconnect when it comes to our history, when it comes to our impact, our influence. And that's been passed down for generations upon generations. I think that's the importance, though. One of the importances why it's so vital and critical for the Black church to be involved in our lives. Everything that we know and appreciate, a lot of what we know and appreciate has come through the womb of the Black church. It is the Black church's job, I believe, one of the roles, to make sure that we keep that message before our people. We don't get that anywhere else. We don't get that in school systems. You know, that message is measured in our schools. We don't get it in the barbershop. I believe it's the Black church's role to make sure that we're getting that message out about the importance, about the power, about the influence that African Americans have. And sometimes that message gets distorted because there are some who feel like we've arrived. We've not arrived because we got a few people elected or because we got a good job or we moved in the suburbs. I believe it's the Black church's job to make sure that we're constantly reiterating a message, constantly preaching and teaching and sharing that we don't arrive until all of us arrive. And I think that's become distorted and become lost. But it's forums like this and church that helps that message to get out. And so I want to thank you for allowing us to be a part of that message.
Apostle Musser.
Thank you. And also thank you for the opportunity to share. This is an incredible discussion that, we can really pull some good solutions out of this. Pastoring a very diverse congregation. We have over 50 nations in our church, and it's predominantly Black. And one of the things that we've noticed in light of how this wound has been opened up again with everything in the last year or so, is that we've had to deal with Caucasian people that are listening to a different rhetoric. They're listening to statistics and radio shows, and they have a totally different rhetoric. And it's been very difficult for us. In fact, it's almost like a boxing match at times to help people to understand that this is very real. And one of the ways we try to do this is that we've really stressed the fact that Black America is hurting right now. And if people would just understand that when people hurt, then everything gets thrown out the door. Your statistics, forget your statistics. If people are hurting, it's very real to them. It just makes no sense to me how white people can tell Black people how they feel and how they don't feel. So it's like in our church, we have these conversations with people and there's real pain there. There's real pain from these people. And so we just come back when we have conversations with people that are, sort of bouncing around the rhetoric. We just say, look, there are people that are hurting and there's not equality, and there needs to be change, and the church needs to be responsible for that change. And I believe, as Pastor Purvis was saying, with the Black church, I believe the Caucasian people need to be educated on what the real issues are here, and that there are people that are hurting. I've talked to people that, I've got good friends, African-American friends that lived in this community. We live in Gwinnett County and lived in this community for 30, 40 years, and they're still profiled when they walk in the street. And it's like those, you can't deny those things, but yet a lot of people in the church are just trying to say, no, it's no big deal. Everybody just needs to get over it. And in essence, God is a healer and he will heal us. But at the same time, we need to treat all people equal, and it's not happening. And I believe every church needs to expose that. I believe every church just needs to expose that there's hurting people, and people need to, and now, of course, we're talking about our Asian community as well.
Absolutely.
And a lot of the things that our Asian community is going through. It's the same thing with the Hispanics. It's just like, we just need to, learn how to love people and realize this pain is very real, and the inequities are also very real. And it's time for the church to do something about it.
And I'll say this too. I mean, I serve as an associate pastor in Dallas, Georgia, in Paulding County. And one of the things that has been very disheartening to me is that I had a person who actually posted something, who was a pastor. It's like, the Asian community has never stood up for the Black community. Why should we care? All lives matter, period. No one at the end of the day has the right to take anyone's life. That's something that for us who are in the spiritual community, we believe that is God-given and God-given alone. And that's, I think that's just so important. But I also, and he doesn't even know we have a connection. I heard this brother preach at Dr. Matt King's Carter's last anniversary. I was a member of Mount Olive Baptist Church, and he preached, and I've been captivated by him ever since. He doesn't even know it. I've been a huge fan of his ever since. He preached a sermon about Mary and Martha, and I love it. But I'm going to bring Pastor E. Dewey Smith in, and I'm also going to bring in Pastor Musser, Pastor Lisa Musser, because this question goes to you guys. Like, one of the things that I'm finding interesting is, one of the things I'm really working on, even in my ministry that we have in Paulding, is what can we do to make sure that we're stopping, as a spiritual community, we're stopping the prison or what we call it, the eliminate the school to prison pipeline, right? That term is used so much. And I think that as a spiritual community, like, we can do better. We can do better in our churches. We can have more forums like this. One of the things that I love so much about D.A. Brody is that he told me before, when I first met him, he said, if you can get me on the front of a church, I'll go and I'll tell the kids what to do if they are guilty and if they're not guilty, right? How do we have that dialogue with them to help them understand, to where we don't have young Black men, young Asian men, young white men who are shot down in the streets out of ignorance? And we'll start with either one of you want to jump on in.
Well, one thing that we've done to help that school to prison kind of cut that is having the men in our church mentor the young men. And the thing that we're really big on is, it's not just in the church. Like, the church, we are supposed to be outside the four walls. So, when I say anything, it means community, not just church members. But we've had the men in our church, mentor fatherless young men, and, take them to whatever ball games, or just build relationship with them. And so they have somebody that they can trust that helps to guide them through life and so forth. And also on the the prison thing and the criminal justice thing, we have a ministry called Breaking Boundaries, that we actually literally house men who are in transition, trying to transition from prison back into civilization again, and trying to equip them, because like we were talking about earlier, that criminal justice reform was so powerful. They just can't be thrown out there and be expected to know what to do. So we house, right now we just have one house for men, and we're trying to, equip them, give them whatever they need. They need their GED, they need their driver's license, they need a job. We have employers in our church who are willing to hire them just to get them some kind of experience, some kind of put them back in society. And so that's something, in our opinion, because we have sought, what can we as the church do? And that's one reason we're here. We want to know what we can do as the body of Christ, because we agree with you that, the church, and I feel like that's why Black Lives Matter, the movement, came in, because where was the church? If the church was really doing what the church should have done. And so when Christians come at us with, and I have my bracelet on, but when Christians come at us about that, my response is, well, where were you? What were you doing to make it get to this place? So there was a big gap that should have been filled by the church. And because it wasn't, an organization stepped in. And you know how Christians are, just judging and tearing apart. Well, they believe this and that, so they throw the whole thing out. And I'm like, at least they're doing something. I support them myself because they're doing something. And if it weren't, you know, if the church had not been negligent in what the church should be doing as the body of Jesus Christ, then there wouldn't be a place to fill. So, you know, I have a problem with people who have a problem with that organization because they're doing more than we, the body of Christ, are doing. So, anyhow, you know, we held a like a forum similar to this back in, I guess, May of 2020. And our question, we wanted, it wasn't us talking so much. We wanted Black America to have a voice and to tell us what we can do. And things that came out of that for us was we held 3 voting drives to try to give everybody a chance to get registered to vote in this past election and do anything we could. So we really serve the community in that way. And then, you know, back to your question about, I think, to me personally, what it takes to break that school to prison thing, because we're involved in this on a regular basis, of course, in the church. And to me, it takes relationships. It takes people, you know, there's good programs and things like that. Big brother, big sister. I'm not familiar with that enough to even speak to it. But for the church, it takes, you know, these young people have to feel like you genuinely care. And that every time you meet with them, you know, we do too much just correcting and telling them what they're doing wrong. And in my humble opinion, they need people to speak into them and to believe in them. Like the first Sunday of every month, well, before COVID, you know, we bless our children. We take the opportunity we bless them. And if there's a child in there that doesn't have a parent or a father figure, then, you know, we know who those children are. We make sure they are blessed by somebody. But I think, you know, if we show a genuine concern, like we're willing to step outside of our life, our schedule, and be willing to be inconvenienced for the sake of another young life coming up to help guide them, and where they know they have a safe place, a place that they can trust and, you know, share their struggles with, and they won't be condemned. But the thing is, they have to know you really care. They have to know that you love them enough to really take time with them. And then, you know, you can help to guide them and things like that. But I think there's just too much of, you shouldn't do this, you can't do that. And there's just not enough building them up. I believe in you. You know, you're amazing. What are your interests? How can I help you get there? And to really just help build them and, you know, put a positive foundation. So even if they started in just a horrible health situation, you know, to be that force, that this is what the body of Christ should be doing. The church as a whole has lost its focus, you know, on religious things and not the real work of Jesus Christ. But if we can get back in there and help build a platform of positivity, like a launching pad, and stick with them out of a genuine heart, you know, that's just some of the things we're trying to do and where our heart really is.
Pastor Smith.
First of all, let me thank you for being a part, and just to be a part of such an incredible forum with so many great thought leaders. And I've been blessed by it. Pardon me for my delay in getting on, but thank you for being inviting me to be a part. I think for me, it's very important, and I think we have to draw a dichotomy. I think sometimes our expectations may be too high when we talk about the church. I think the church is not monolithic. And I believe what has happened for many of us is we don't understand historically that certain faith traditions have supported oppression. Certain faith traditions provided platforms and a theological premise by which slaves could be oppressed, by which Native Americans could be mistreated. And so I think we haven't really delved into American history, 400 years of how the religious community and the political community have worked together to bring about marginalization and disenfranchisement, whether it be through suppressing women, whether Native Americans, African Americans, our Latino brothers and sisters. And so I think we have to really understand that everybody who says I'm a part of the church, you have to ask them what church. You know, when you think about the fact that Bull Connor on Saturdays would put dogs and fire hoses on little boys and girls in Kelly Ingram Park in Birmingham, and yet on Sunday morning, he was a deacon at his church. We're talking about 50 years ago. So we're not far removed, and even to this day in this, and I hate to say this because I'm trying to be as unifying as possible, but the past 5 years have brought about a vitriolic nature, even in faith. And I think a lot of our what has happened, we have bowed at the altar of politics. And many of us have made the Republican Party the cure-all and the paradigm for faith in Christianity, and the Democratic Party for many represents the demonic. And in a real sense, it's the same coin. It's sometimes the less of two evils. But I think what has happened in our world is we've got to find like-minded relationships and connections, because there are many who still want to be purveyors of this white supremacist Christian nationalism. And if we continue to expect people to speak out, some are not, because a lot of my white colleagues and brothers and sisters, they don't want to have this conversation because it will be too costly. It will be painful and it'll bring a lot of pressure on them. So they've chosen just to be silent. And so I think we've got to somehow detangle faith from politics. It seems like politics have just basically contaminated faith traditions and have made us become more warped and more separated. The second thing I want to say about that is, as we try to detangle our faith from the political arena and look at the ministry of Jesus, Howard Thurman talked about Jesus and disinherited, and Cone talked about having a liberation motif in our preachment and in our ministries and our endeavors. I think for me, the issue is a policy issue. And I think that's why we have to be careful, even in terms of our personal theologies, because the real sense is America is a nation that offers opportunity to all people, regardless of their faith tradition. I'm a man of faith. I'm a Christian. I believe in Christian principles. But just because somebody does not think how I think or feel how I feel, I still have to realize that America, as much as we want to say this, the Constitution drives what we believe. And I think we've got to find a way to navigate between personal theology and public policy. And what has happened in many instances, women are still being oppressed. A woman makes 80 cents to a man's dollar. Why? Because many people to this day feel that a woman can't hold positions. And they use the Bible to convey that particular type of preachment. And so in terms of the prisoner pipeline system, there are theologies that suggest if your skin is darker, you deserve to be there. People still believe that Ham was cursed and that our dark skins are cursed by God. And that has to affect how they see policy. I was just appalled the other day to see our Asian sisters killed, and the law enforcement official had the nerve to say the guy was at the end of his rope and had a bad day. What in the Gehenna is a bad day? We've had bad days for 400 years, but we don't take that type. So my concern is we have to get into a policy issue. And so somehow, some way, we can preach, we can teach, we can preach Jesus. I believe in Jesus, but preaching Jesus alone is not going to help us to look at how we spend more monies on the privatization of what Michelle Alexander called the new Jim Crow. How do we stop incarcerating our people and start educating them? If they can build prisons based on the test of third grade boys and girls, then how can we not stop that cycle then? The second thing is, even Georgia, there's a law now in the books now that's in state legislature about how Georgia is the leading state for probation. And so what happens, our people cannot even get an upper hand because we are almost double some other states. So we put them in a bad situation. And that's not because of Jesus or Allah or atheism or agnosticism. That's a policy issue. And until we understand how does my faith inform my policy, and is my faith allowing me to be compartmentalized and segregated because I believe somebody's going to hell because they don't believe what I believe. Regardless of whether they believe in Jesus Christ or not, people deserve an opportunity for freedom, opportunity, and equal justice under the law. And so I'm concerned that on one end, we've allowed our faith to inform our view of policy. And then not only that, we've allowed our faith sometimes to help us to build up this hierarchy of who deserves it and who does not. And until we deal with policy, we're going to be spinning wheels. And I think that's what we have to do. How do we get involved in affecting policy for all people? And so that's my little spiel. I'm sorry for going on that.
No, because seriously, recently, that's been something that I have been preaching in my office to like all of my employees every day, that if we have an issue with the system And if we have an issue with a George Floyd being killed on the side of the street, we have to look at the policy aspect that gives the officer the right. Like if he gets off, just to say, we have to look at the policy aspect that gives him the right to hold his foot to somebody's neck for that long to kill him, right? And actually, you guys are awesome because this leads right into our next part of dialogue, which is going to be a little bit more open, and I won't kind of pinpoint these questions to anybody. Voter suppression. So my mom does a lot in Florida. She recently has become the state representative for voter suppression in her state, right? So she went on Facebook the other day, and Georgia is not alone in trying to pass what we call voter suppression bills or bills that fits a broken system. And the first question I really had is the system really as broke as what we're trying to fix, right? Because we talked about this earlier today. D.A. Brody is an elected official. Judge Angela Brown is an elected official. Park Cannon is an elected official. They don't just get to the bench or they don't just become sheriff. Sheriff Owens, who now has Colonel Cotton on to represent him. These people don't just get to the positions they're in. They are elected to their positions, right? And it's the system, D.A. Brody, because you ran against the system and you ran in this system. Was there voter fraud? Were some of the votes for you fraudulent?
No, there is no voter fraud. If there is, it's very minuscule. What happened is because the people that they wanted to be elected or not elected, they had to come up for a reason to why they wanted to suppress the votes even more. And I got to say something about what Pastor Smith said when he talked about the probation here in Georgia, probation and parole. That is one of the ways that they use to have voter suppression, is by the number of people we have on parole and probation, not allowing them to vote, either if they're in jail, not getting them the stuff that they need to vote, or if they have a felony and they're still on sentence, the ability not to vote. We have to think all the way back to 1863, when a lot of these laws were put in place that were totally designed for one reason only, to continue to suppress the vote, to make sure that African Americans or minorities in general could not vote, could not get proper representation in the government. And it still continues today. And that's why we've seen all across this nation the number of voter suppression laws that have been tried to put in place. It's not because voting is broken, it's because they want to make sure they have an opportunity to keep who they want in office. We have to think this past presidential election, more people voted than ever before, including here in Georgia. So if the system is broken, that wouldn't have happened. But it just happened to be that the people that they wanted to have elected were not elected. And that's why they're trying to do everything they can to make sure they can suppress the vote.
And this part is open, but I actually do want to shoot to somebody who I have not brought in yet. Ricky Brown has a very interesting story. He went to prison. I mean, I'll tell part of it. Went to prison for almost 13 years. He came out and ran for office down in, I think it was South Fulton or South Clayton, and was about to win his election. And then Ricky Brown, what happened to you? And this deals with voter suppression too as well. What happened to you? Tell us about your situation.
Well, good evening, everybody. First of all, I want to say, man, that I'm really proud to be on a panel of such great people, distinguished people. My name is Ricky Brown, a guy that just served 13 years in prison from the '94 crime bill. I got caught up in the war on drugs back in those days. So I served 13 years in federal prison, but I came home with a different mindset. I came home with the mindset of I wanted to be better for myself, my family, my community. And so I started working, tried to get a job, couldn't really get a job to support my family. So God gave me a vision, create your own job, helping people like you. So I started a staffing agency called Next Step Staffing, and that staffing agency has been very successful. We are a staffing agency that with a cause that help ex-offenders like me. I had a young man on the phone just a few minutes ago who I go into the prisons. I went into the Rice Street jails, the Cobb County jails, the state prisons, the federal prisons. And these men need someone to talk to them that's been where they're at. It's good to talk up here and talking to people down there, but they don't understand and listen to people that hasn't been there where they've been. Luckily, but I've been there. After serving 13 years in prison, 2 years in Leavenworth, didn't even speak for 2 years. But I came home and God gave me a mission, and I started that staffing agency, and we've been able to hire over 600 men and women like me and giving them jobs. So I was living in a community that was the poorest community in the city of Atlanta, which was the 3rd district. After doing my
You're muted, Ricky.
Muted.
You muted yourself, Ricky.
Okay,
Okay,
sorry,
you're
can you hear me
back.
now? Okay, so you know, I was living in a community that you know, that was the poorest community in the city of Atlanta. After coming home from prison, after serving 13 years in prison, I saw they was building a new Mercedes-Benz stadium in my community, and I just refused at that point to stand and watch a $2 billion building built in the faces of poor people. And so I stood up and I wanted to do something different for my community. I wanted to show them, don't let your past determine your future. And so we've been successful at doing that. And I decided I want to run for city council, want to show men, either you have a seat at the table or you're on the menu. So I want to show them that it could be done. So the first time I ran for city council against Ivory Young here in the city of Atlanta for District 3, people say I was winning, went through all of the early voting. I was winning. I think I was winning. People think I was winning. But just that Monday before the general election, they said, oh, we didn't know you had been in prison. So they kicked me off the ballot, had a hearing, kicked me off the ballot. So I lost that race because my votes were suppressed. Not only were my votes were suppressed, but the people who voted for me votes were suppressed. But I took that on the chin and I said, why did you kick me off the ballot? They said, well, your crime was a drug charge. And so that crime was considered moral turpitude. And that was the reason I was kicked off the ballot. But when that happened, I wanted to know what did I need to do to get my rights back. And so I filed, I did everything that I could. And sadly to say, 3 months after the incumbent beat me and won the race, he passed. And by that time, I had looked in my mailbox after filing. I had got a full pardon. I filed and got my rights back. I felt like Juneteenth when the Negro was free and didn't even know it. But I want to show people, don't let your past determine your future. Get your rights back, because if you don't get your rights back and don't get your rights restored, we're 3/5 of a man, just how it was designed. And so I encourage people like myself to get your rights back. And I want to show them not only do you get your rights back, you can run for public office, win or lose. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about my right to win. And I'm glad to say that I had that experience, but there is voter suppression in the state of Georgia. I'm a witness of it. Certain people didn't want me to win. It felt like I was going to be a Robin Hood, I guess. But, but at the end of the day, man, it was a great experience. And I want to show people, man, that, you know, that it can be done. With Congressman Kwanzaa Hall, who was on the call earlier, I'm happy to say, when he got elected, he elected me as the Criminal Justice Reform Coordinator for his office. And that was something that has never been done. And I'm proud to say, as a Justice Reform Coordinator for Kwanzaa Hall and Congressman John Lewis, it was just an honor to be a Criminal Justice Reform Coordinator after serving 13 years in prison. But, you know, we got April 11th is coming up. The 94 crime bill, this can be challenged now. And so I'm going to encourage any person, judges, DAs. We're going to open an office in my office to start helping those young men get their records expunged so they'll be productive members of society like myself. There are plenty of Rickies out there. I'm not the only Ricky. There are plenty of men out there that if you give them a second chance, they will. When I go in, I had a young man on the phone just a few minutes ago, Anthony Benton. He remembered when I went into the prison and I spoke to all of the young men in that prison. And he remembered me and he came to me, and when he came home, I showed him how to start his own trucking business. I showed him how to get his EIN number. I showed him how, so it's each one teach one. Right. Now he's a very successful young man, made over $200,000 last year, just coming right out of prison, just because somebody went in there in that pod, in that prison, and talked to him and talked to those young men and talked to them and showed them how I did it. And so I want to encourage people like the DAs and the pastors and the judges, give me an opportunity to talk to these men before they come home. I think if they get the right person to talk to them and tell them how they did it. If you haven't been to prison, you don't know how to talk to prisoners. Right. It's called penology. understanding the criminal mind. And so I'm happy to say that, I'm an example for a lot of young men, and I want to show them we can vote, man. Don't take our vote for granted. Get into the political process. And because, there are over 700,000 men and women who are released from jails and prisons every year nationwide like me. I'm pretty sure the DAs and judges know that. But, when you think about those numbers over the years, that simply means you have more ex-offenders, people like me, on the streets of America than you have in the U.S. Armed Forces combined.
Wow.
We are the majority.
You know what? It's interesting though. My mom, true story. My mom had not been incarcerated in over 28 years. She voted in 2008 down in Florida, and then when she went to go vote in 2012, they told her that she could not vote because she was not eligible to vote. And when she ended up, like a week after she was not found ineligible to vote, she got a letter in the mail saying that they made a mistake and she was really eligible to vote, and that her vote should have been counted, and it was not. But this is an open part of discussion. And I seen that Colonel Cotton had your hand raised at one point, and he stepped in for Sheriff Craig Owens in reference to this topic about voter suppression. And this is open. I mean, I want anybody who wants to jump in, please. I welcome you.
Hey, so good evening, everyone. Braxton Cotton, Deputy Chief of Staff for Sheriff Owens. And it's really interesting to hear how everything is kind of coalescing between Attorney Griggs, between Ricky, and my chapter bruh, Pastor Purvis over there. It's really interesting to hear these conversations. And I'll just be brief. The next step, aside from getting individuals to show up at the polls and tender their vote, right, is to get them involved in policy. And that's the bottom line. We're starting in the 100-meter dash, 150 meters back. So with that being said, for anybody that is really interested in really being able to affect change globally, at least in the country or in our community, in the minority community, the next step, aside from, hey, just showing up and exercising your right to vote, whether you are disenfranchised or what have you, the next good step is putting yourself in a position to educate, as leaders as we are, those individuals coming up behind us, or individuals that may have some type of interest in getting involved in affecting policy. And I think at the end of the day, Ricky said it best. If you're not at the table for the meal, then you're on the menu, right?
Right.
It means putting individuals up for elected office, and then, just like other communities do, cultivating individuals and sending them to Congress, right, as interns and aides, sending them to the State House so they can learn the business as you were. So I would just, that was on my heart a couple of minutes ago. I wanted to share that. We have some opportunities here as we continue to get minority elected officials in these places where back in the day you didn't come to Cobb County. You know what I mean? So I would just offer that to the panel, and thank you very much for allowing me to have a couple of seconds.
And
Can I say something? Can I say something
Absolutely.
real quick about Major Cotton? I did not know he was in this position. But when I was trying to get my rights back, I don't know if he wants me to say this, but this guy, I called him and I was telling him what was going on, that I wanted to get my rights back so I could get in office, so I could run for office. And this guy, in the position that he was in, he did everything he could to help me get my rights back. And I just want to thank you for that, man. And because of you, brother, I've been able to inspire other men like me to be a part of the political process.
That's awesome, Ricky. That's awesome. In my previous life, I was the vice chair of the Georgia Parole Board.
Oh, wow.
That's exactly.
Ricky and I had some conversations like Mr. Griggs. It's all about networking. Mr. Griggs came and taught a class. I was teaching a class down at Atlanta Metropolitan. He came and did a Black Lives Matter segment for me. This is right when the justice reform. I'm very passionate about criminal justice reform. Very, 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 very passionate.
Always happy.
Yeah, can tell you. But blessings. I didn't know that paperwork came through. I know my name was on the signature block for it. I'm just gonna put that out there. I'm not on the parole board.
Got a full pardon, man. I'm free now.
Kudos. And I want to jump into this because I really want to talk about the crime bill, or as we call it, the voting rehabilitation bill that passed in the House. We were out there with Attorney Griggs. My organization was out there, and what shocked me the most was there was about 50 people out there, right? As this bill was getting ready to be passed by the House, and they end up passing the House, as we know. And just for those who are out there, just because it passed the House does not mean it's over with. It still has to go to each Senate committee. We're working with each senator right now. We're going to each committee as an organization, and we will not stop. And from a personal, another standpoint too, that we have another way of stopping this, and it's in the U.S. House. We can stop this in the House, where even what they vote for here on the state level will be of none effect if we pass the bills that we need to pass in the House. But let's go to you, Attorney Griggs, Attorney Mitchell. One of the things I love so much about the state of Georgia is Florida had to amend their constitution about 2 years ago in order to give a person the right to vote once they have served their time. And I think that I think I spoke to Colonel Hunton about this as well, is that the most valuable thing that a person has is their right to vote. I don't care if they get the right to carry a gun. I don't care if they get the right to do anything else. Give them a vote, and you give them a voice, period, right? What do you guys think about this bill? And even after Attorneys Griggs and Mitchell are done, if anybody else wants to jump in, please jump in. But what do you guys think about this bill? Like, is this bill needed? Is this bill really needed?
Well, I mean, I think exactly, and I appreciate him for saying it, but how DA Brody said, voter fraud does not really exist in Georgia because, of the energy that has been exuded for the last 4 years around voting. You had more people going out to the polls. And so, my opinion of House Bill 538 and Senate Bill 241 and now Senate Bill 202, and there's another one coming, is that you are really disenfranchising not only the minority voters, but your own base. Because Georgia is such a political hotbed right now and is continuing to build, that we really need to embrace the new voters, embrace them. I mean, you have returning citizens that have now gotten their rights back and are now voting. You have people that felt that they were marginalized that are now coming into the fold and voting. And the best way to keep them engaged is not to suppress them. That's just going to make them mad and make them want to vote even more, but to actually listen. And so that's why it's important. And I must give you kudos, Sean, for this panel, because this is powerful. The entire state of Georgia needs to hear all sides of the system and community members and people that have agency having this conversation, because this is really what Georgia looks like. Us having our conversation about what moves Georgia forward and how we can fix the problems in the system, and how we, even though we may disagree on, policy, we can craft something that fits the needs of all Georgians. And so with, voter suppression is very real. And you have to understand, especially with like the no excuse absentee balloting, a large majority of Georgians use no excuse absentee balloting because we're in the middle of a pandemic. So whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you want it to feel safe, but also exercise your voice. And so now when we go down to the Capitol, and we've been down there for 18 straight days, protesting and elevating our voices to make sure our elected officials understand that 7 million Georgians want to exercise the right to the franchise. And if you don't listen to them, they're going to vote you out. It's important that we have these real conversations about how Georgia is moving and how it's reshaping and how that is affecting the entire country. So I think the conversations we're having right now with different members of the system about what the inherent problems of the system are, and I think everybody has agreed, even though we don't agree with the terms, we agree that fundamentally we have to fix some of these problems and reallocate expenditures, whether it's law enforcement reallocating the expenditures or the community reallocating the expenditures. We have to do this. I think that it's incumbent, especially in this moment, to have this conversation with the entire state. Because every single day outside the Capitol, there's a rainbow coalition of Georgians that are speaking in one voice. They were down there today. I didn't get a chance to be there because I'm with you guys and I've been on 3 town halls, but they were down there standing with our Asian brothers and sisters saying, this is no place for hate. We don't want oppression of them. They've been down there with our Black brothers and sisters saying the same thing. They've been down there with women saying the same thing. They've been down there with otherly abled individuals saying the same thing. And I think what we have to do is we have to get across to some of our brothers under the Gold Dome that we are no longer in 1950s Georgia. It's 2021. And the more people that come into the conversation, the better it is for the state and the better it is for us not only to be number one in business, but also for us to be the number one in rights. And so I think that's why this conversation is so important. That's why we have to kill Senate Bill 241 and House Bill 531 and Senate Bill 202, because if we really want Georgia to be the beloved community, we have to value people's voices, and people's voices are their votes.
And I'm gonna
You
say
said
this. I
something
hate.
very interesting.
Go ahead.
I'm jumping.
No, real
You
quick
said
though.
something-
We're gonna call this the fast round because there are people who are asking questions, and I want to be able to get to their questions before the end of it. But go ahead, Judge Brown, and then I'm gonna shoot across.
Listen, fastly, I was just gonna say, you said the right thing in the middle of that. There needs to be a conversation. We're not you have the bills because people are sick and tired of things the way they are and not being heard. And so if you are not going to hear me as your elected official, we need to vote you out. That's why I'm voted in and the chief judge was voted out. And guess what? If Angela Brown doesn't do the right thing for justice, then people need to vote me out and put someone else in. But we need to keep going. And even though you try to suppress the vote, what does that mean? That means then we come out in triple and quadruple voting, and we let you know that this is not acceptable in Georgia, and we're going to vote you out.
I want to bring in Gabriel. I'm going to shoot across to everybody. Gabriel, I know you have, because you've been clapping over there. I seen you.
Oh yeah, there's a lot to say about voter suppression. And the thing is, to be perfectly honest, there's one thing the Republicans are right about. There is a problem with our election system, but it's not voter fraud. The problem is voter suppression, right? In 2018, they found in a study that 20% of the people that they were purging in the voter purges were not eligible to be purged from the rolls, but they removed them from the voting registration rolls anyway. Fortunately, we made that up with registering them to vote again, but that's just a waste of time for everyone involved. You have voter ID laws that, prevent people who don't have ID from voting as well. And we make it very difficult for people to get a free ID, even though it is free. The documentation required to get a free voter ID is very difficult, especially for homeless populations, because they don't have the documentation necessary. If the bills that they're passing, HB 531, SB 241, and now SB 202, which is even bigger, it's 92 pages long, combining all of these things from the other two bills. If this were really about voter fraud, then they would have actual things that would help with like system security. For example, there was a bill that I found that was actually seems pretty decent to me, creating unique barcodes on absentee ballots to track each ballot to make sure that each voter is able to be tracked and you get the vote correctly. And it doesn't disenfranchise any voters through that barcode. But that bill didn't even get a hearing, right? And so they want to cut voting hours. They want to cut voting hours, cut weekend voting, cut early voting in general, make it much harder to get a vote by mail. SB 241 eliminates no excuse absentee ballot. It's just none of this makes any sense in regards to voter fraud. So the real answer, really, what this is about, is that they don't want to lose. Right?
DA Patsy, you want to jump in on this as well as far as voter suppression?
Well, I think someone said earlier that we should just double down, triple people getting out to the polls. And just like Stacey Abrams said during the campaigns, let's just flood it. Whatever they want to put out there, whatever rules they want to put out there, we just have to educate our community to understand that that's exactly what it is, voter suppression. So get out and encourage them to get out when they can get out. But I think it's a shame that people are being penalized like this. Some people are working hourly wages. And I've had people when I was running in my primary that left because the lines were way, way, way too long. So we need to be doing more to have more involvement with what, when it comes to voting, we have to encourage more people just to be out there. And as I say, we have to continue educating the community to flood the polls, period.
And
Let's
I
just
want
get
to
it done.
I want to bring in the spiritual community. So this is going to be for Pastor Smith, Pastor Purvis, Pastor Musser, and Apostle Musser. Like one part of the bill is that they want to get rid of souls to the polls. And for you guys who know, like I'm from Florida, souls to the polls is a huge deal on Sundays. How does that impact, and how can the church play a role in pushing back on this? Because I mean, a lot of us come from churches that have pretty good sized membership, right? How can we play a role to help make sure that we push back on this bill? Because if this bill becomes law, I mean, it'd be against the law to take people to the church. I mean, take people from church to the polls on Sunday. Anybody can start.
Yeah. I think for me, it's the realization that we're fighting against fear. Okay. It's a fear of loss of power. It's a fear of the world, America becoming darker. It's a fear of women becoming more in power. It's a fear of Black people becoming more in power. It's a fear of, what they see as the LGBT community. It's a fear of that. So we're fighting against people who are suppressing our vote basically because of fear. And they're trying to make us fearful. I think what's important, one of the things we can do is really have a real conversation. You guys here's what you're afraid of. You have your beliefs on same-sex marriage. You have your belief on this. I think the faith community has to have conversations because as we continue to flood the systems and fight against the laws, that's true. But unfortunately, until we deal with the issues, what makes them want to suppress the vote? I think that's a larger issue. What is the fear? What are you afraid of? And I think we have to have that conversation amongst ourselves. And then we have to our church is a voting precinct. I saw something that said the other day that it's illegal now. They're trying to make it illegal to pass out water with their long lines or snacks. I mean, that is absolutely, it's incorrigible. But I think as we continue to press and push and fight back and let our voices be heard, we still have to get to the larger issue. What are you guys afraid of? And I think when we deal with that from a faith perspective, I think maybe we can make some inroads. Some of it is just wickedness in high places.
Right.
But I think there's a lot of fear, a lot of propaganda that's been spewed on some of these networks that have made us just not want to come together, have to galvanize around unity in the sense of humanity. So we've got to deal with that. I think dealing with humanity is just as important as getting people out to vote. And I think that's where the faith community can come in, helping us to see the humanity in each other.
Pastor Purvis.
I think in addition to what Pastor Smith said is, Souls to Polls is a very powerful movement. There's strength in unity. There's strength in numbers. There's no greater day than Sunday when we're all amassed together. But there also has to be accountability beyond Sunday and beyond election day. Beyond election day, we cannot just gather our strength and gather numbers when it's time for a big election. Once the election is over, I think this is one of the areas that we have room to grow in. Once the election is over, we have to hold these folks accountable. And so when these bills come to the forefront, I believe it's the same souls that we took to the polls to vote should be the same souls that are calling our elected officers and officials and fussing and fighting about the bills that are inappropriate for our community. I think sometimes we let these folks get in the office and then that's it until the next 4 years. So as the polls becomes more vital and critical when we say to those same members on Monday, on Tuesday, on Wednesday, hey, we are now calling, we're now emailing, we're now showing up at the Capitol to make sure that people are doing their job. As Judge Brown said earlier, and the folks who are not doing their jobs, let's get them out of office. Let's make sure that we are holding people's feet to the fire so that we can bring about change.
Apostle Moser, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I feel the same way as these pastors feel, is that we've got to work with the person. We've got to get them to the point that they're passionate about being a part of the decision-making process and to develop the people in our church to push this issue. We're a voting, we did 2 voting drives, and to encourage this and to encourage it from the pulpit, because if we don't push this issue, and it's not an issue that the church can push one Sunday a year, it's something we need to push all the time. It's an issue we just need to hammer it so that everybody understands that this is about equality, this is about justice, this is about reform, this is about pulling our nation together. And if we don't hammer this issue, it's just gonna, it's gonna blow up and then it's gonna die. And we've got to keep it alive. We got to do everything we can to keep it out in front of people, so that and not only that, but that everybody's voting the right way, that they're voting integrity, they're voting, they're voting character, because God knows we need a lot of that. We need a lot of that.
But then I think the dangerous part of that is that character is different based upon where you come from and how you're raised, right? Character is different, right? Because once again, I go back to how a whole listing, people who don't even know me on Facebook have marked me as a leftist, a terrorist. I mean, I was called the terrorist, and I listen, it's crazy just to want to stand up for all lives matter, just because of the fact that I choose to deal with the house that is on fire right now. Does that make me a terrorist, right? And we know, even from this last election, that we had about 440 million people who voted for against what most of the country voted for. And there's still people, I think, where Pastor Lisa kind of brought this up earlier today, there's still people out there who listen to that and believe that that's truth in that. And we got to be able to call a spade when it's a spade, right? The truth is that there's some things that we hear every day that is not true. And we go back to even recently when the sheriff said that the guy was just having a bad day, right? Let that have been me. Would the comment have been that I was just having a bad day and I killed 8 people? And that's the reality we have to kind of deal with, and we have to be able to have a dialogue about that reality and be honest about that reality. Because I'm pretty sure if it was me, no matter if I would have said I was just having a bad day, it would not have made it on the news.
If it was your family would be calling me, and we would be having a vigil. Out there.
Truth be told. Hey, I just want to chime in briefly, pastors, and I know we got the spiritual community on the line. I think I grew up Baptist, grandma's house on the weekend. I think we've been way too passive for a little bit too long. I don't think it's on any particular group to understand why you hate me. I don't think I should have to spend time trying to justify my position and my being on this earth for you to understand, for you to support me. I have enough of that. I don't know how long your church sessions are. Usually I go is hour, 2 hours. Spend some time saying how we get this fixed, as opposed to trying to educate people. This is my question, my empathy to you. How we fix this by getting people involved. Let's stop that voter suppression. No, they stopping you. They don't want you to vote because they don't want you to advance your rights. Let's have transparent and real conversation. Let's stop trying to be politically or nicely correct. Okay, there's an assault on people. I applaud Colonel Hunton, the DAs for being on here, for being real, because I know it's probably you might not be popular in all segments. Might not be receptive, but all this dancing, trying to figure out why the other side is doing, what? Let's advocate for what works right and be inclusive. Show that we don't want to hurt anybody. We just trying to advance and make America better, make this world better. Just because I'm a different color does not mean that I'm trying to hurt you. That's something you need therapy, but I don't have time to educate you because I got my kids I'm trying to raise right now. Okay, I got some people I'm trying to help. I got a boy right now who's going through something, and I need to get him a little money to help him feed his family. Okay, I don't have time to try to uneducate hate. I just want to throw that out there. There's a lot of talk about what's going on, about hey, understand what. What you mean he had a bad day? Man, look, lock him up. I'm a defense attorney, and I love what I do.
I second that as a defense attorney. Y'all, matter of fact, y'all cut the recording on. Lock him up.
No, I mean, give him, of course, we want to have fair justice. I just want to say, we want to have fair justice, but don't make it, the problem when that type of thing happens, and I know I'm going to talk about white and black, white community is kind of like, well, you did this, we understand what's going on. No, condemn the violence like you condemn anything else. Start from them, just equal. We don't want more than anybody else, just equal acts, just equal application of the law is what we're moving for.
Pastor Lisa Muser, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Well, to pick up what he was saying, you know, I think obviously, you know, whatever laws and policies, all of that is, of course, very important. Everything we're discussing is, but at the end of the day, you know, none of that is going to dismantle white supremacy. You know, that's a matter of the heart. And what I feel like, and we feel like, is, you know, until white people start confronting other white people, until other white people, you know, start calling out, like, you know, the people in your living room, your uncle so-and-so or whatever, start calling it. We have to dismantle the heart of white supremacy, because it's behind, you know, we all know the history of things. You can put any law on the book and it doesn't matter. Somebody's going to find a way around it if their heart's not right. And I mean, you know, we would love to, you know, have an easy answer to this, but one thing we've been trying to do is show, you know, white people, like, this is recent history. This isn't something that happened 1,000 years ago. You know, y'all want everyone to just get over it and move on all in the name of some kind of fake peace, but this is our real history, and trying to confront, you know, the truth of our history. And so to help people understand, like, this is what, you know, there's a history to this voter suppression. There's a history behind this mass incarceration. There's a real legitimate history here, and it's a very recent history. It's not a distant history. And trying to, you know, get people to understand this and to try to pull down these strongholds of white supremacy that's behind everything. And I just feel like until people really start confronting, you know, the oppressor, confronting, you know, its own, and being, you know, white people have to be willing to challenge, like, I was brought up this way, and I'm not talking about me, but, you know, I was brought up this way, and, you know, we've done that. And for somebody in that line to say, you know, that's evil, and it's, you know, calling everybody out and confronting everybody, but that whole thing that can't be really legalized so much, you know what I'm saying, that's behind there, that's in the heart, is what we're trying to also attack, along with, you know, everything else that we're discussing here. Policies and all this has been so amazing, and we're just so blessed and honored to be here. And we want to gain from what can we do as a local church here. We're trying to get pieces from you all. What can we do to do our part in all of these areas to affect change? But I think everybody that's white has a duty, has a spiritual God responsibility to call their own out and to confront their own. And like I said, you know, we've been trying to show people, like, this is why, you know, voter suppression is real. This is why, you know, certain people had to take certain tests or pay certain fines just to be able to vote. Like, there's a real history here, and we're hoping that bringing the truth to the front, we've been trying to just bring the truth of this nation's past to the front, so that it can be changed, so that it can be recognized, so that, you know, justice, so we can make the wrongs right, you know, to the extent that we can, you know, rectify some of those and bring justice into the equation, and get people to see, you know, to get a better understanding, you get some kind of education. But at the end of the day, they have to care, you know, they have to care enough to want to hear it. But, you know, we're trying to talk anyhow. So anyhow.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
You know, I just want to say that the passion that Pastor has is very humbling to me. I remember when I was in prison, and in prison, sometimes they put people into different cells with you. I remember a guy that they put in a cell with me. He was a millionaire, but he was considered a racist, a skinhead. And they asked us before they put us in the cell together, do you want to go in the same cell with him? I said, yeah, put me in the cell with him. And this guy we ended up spending about 3 years in that same cell. He was my roommate. But he ended up being one of the best friends that I've ever had. And that's because we were forced to be together. Sometimes in life, you have to be forced to do better. And when they put us in that cell, every day in the cell, 23 hours a day, because we was in the hole, it was just a humbling experience. And one thing he told me, he said, Ricky, he said, I have a lot of money. And he said, and I remember I made a lot of my money off of poor people. He said, I understand that poor people, they buy what they want and then they beg for what they need. And that's how I made my money. But he gave me so much insight of how they felt, how people of a different race felt. I told him how I felt. And ironically, in some instances, I felt the same as him. But after that conversation, me and this guy still is in touch today. But to this day, I don't think he's a racist anymore. I don't think I'm a racist anymore. That's because we were forced in a cell together to have a conversation. And when we're talking about mental health, I heard a lot of people talking about mental health. In prison, there's a lot of mental health going on. And even when you go to prison, you come home in the military, you get certain services for PTSD. They don't get that when they come home from prison. They have to thug it out. And when they have to thug it out, they have to figure it out. So we've got to have conversations with people who have actually been through the system, like myself, and people who have gotten out and figured it out. And one thing about the prison system, only the strong survive when it comes to mental. And I'm lucky to say that I was able to survive. But we got to start having more conversations with people who have actually been to prisons, to people who have been through that system. And let's start having conversations with them and let them have conversations with people like yourself and people who are people in the penal system and who are coming out of the penal system. I've helped many hundreds of young men who I've been to courtrooms talking to judges. I've walked out of courtroom with judges because I gave the judge a different understanding of that person. Locking them up and throwing away the key is not always the answer. And so we've been very successful with that. And let's start having conversations. Let's start getting a degree in penology, understanding the criminal mind. I think if we can start doing that and start talking to people like myself and people who have been through the system, even mental health people, they'll tell you, well, I remember one lady I hired, Kwanzaa had me hire some mental health people. And one of the ladies, she had never spoke. And I gave her a job. And when I gave her check on that Friday, she said simply, thank you, Mr. Ricky. It freaked everybody out because she had never spoke before. So you've got to show people that you care. And you got to show people how to survive and how to make money. And there's a lot of different things that go into the criminal justice reform that we've got to start understanding. Let's start having conversations like this more. Definitely want to talk with a lot of the DAs, the judges, and the attorneys, because there's some different conversations that we got to have that we're definitely not having on this call. But there's definitely some conversation we got to have, and I'm open to talk to anybody. So thank you all so much for having it. I'm probably the only guy here who's been in prison, but hey, I'm free now. Thanks, Braxton Cotton, for helping me to get that my record expunged and be able to show others. Don't let your past determine your future. God bless y'all.
And I want to, we have run out of our time limit. I said that I want to keep it to 7 because I know you guys have other things that you are doing. And Ricky Mims, you got off on me because you jinxed yourself before this even started by saying that you may not get on. But I do want to, the other two topics we were going to talk about was education, which I'm going to skip over. But the last one I kind of want to end on is community engagement. And one of the things that I wanted to say is, first off, thank you to everybody who participated. This video will continue to air throughout the rest of the week. It'll get aired to thousands of people throughout the state of Georgia. So this video won't just stop here. But my biggest thing is that we have to start having more of this dialogue with each other versus trying to yell at each other, right? And I'm going to use a perfect example. About 2 weeks ago, I went and I met with a representative who we could not agree on anything. There was nothing that we agreed on. And he came to me at the very end of our talk. He said to me, he said, listen, you bring me legislation that we can agree on, and I'll take it to the floor for you. And that's a representative who most of the things we talked about, we did not agree on, but we were able to have civilized conversation and hear each other and hear what both of us were saying. And as a community, if we want to start with community engagement, it starts there. Stop yelling at people. Stop yelling over people. Start talking to people. and will make a huge difference. And I think that's from a spiritual standpoint, from a physical standpoint, from every standpoint. If we can talk to each other more and stop talking over each other, I think we can make a huge difference. And I thank you guys, each and every single person who came on this panel. Like, kudos to you guys in the room. I have people who are all in the room with me right now, and they are clapping their hands. Thank you guys so much for everything. Thank you guys for everybody who watched. Thank you guys for everybody who participated. Thank you to Ricky Mims, because this was actually his idea, Count Me In Group and Cobb Pastors Alliance. Thank you so much, my brother, for putting this together and giving me the idea to kind of do this. And I want to say this will not be the last time we hold this discussion. I hope that I get you guys on and we can kind of talk about more of these things. So thank you to Pastor Lisa Musser. Thank you to Stephen George. Thank you to D.A. Brody. Thank you to Ricky Mims. Thank you to Colonel Hunton. Thank you to Apostle Musser. Thank you to Judge, the Honorable. I love calling her the Honorable Judge Angela Brown. And she threw, there you go. Drink the bottle. I love it. Thank you to Attorney Mitchell. Thank you to Ricky Brown. Thank you so much, Gabriel, for joining in for Park Cannon. Thank you so much, Pastor E. Dewey Smith. Dr. Carter used to always have a saying, and he used to say, if you're going to preach this thing, you got to have the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in another hand. So I thank you so much, because that is our reality for those who are preachers on here. We have to be able to relate real world issues to what people don't understand from over 2,000 years ago. Thank you, Pastor Purvis. Thank you, D.A. Gatson. I love it, love it, love it. Everything you guys are trying to do down in Gwinnett County, everything you guys are doing in Cobb County. Thank you to Sheriff Craig Owens, who had to sign off earlier. Thank you to the justice fighting attorney, Gerald Griggs. Thank you guys so much for everything that you guys do. And for everybody who participated, we want to just remind everybody too, tomorrow, this event doesn't end for us. For those who can't come out, we're doing a homeless feeding at 285 Dallas, or 285 Merchants Drive at Created Light Dallas Church from 2 to 4 tomorrow. We're actually picking people up off the streets, bringing them to the church and actually feeding them. Not what we would not want to eat. We're feeding them actually food that we would feed ourselves. I'm talking about pig feet there. They got macaroni and cheese. They got collard greens. They got cabbage. 285 Merchants Drive. So if anybody wants to come out and volunteer, my team will be there. Thank you guys so much again. And everybody, you guys have a blessed day. And thank you so much for everybody who
thank you, Pastor Dewey Smith, my man.
God bless y'all. On beat. Take care.
Y'all have a blessed day.
Amen. Thank you.
God bless y'all. Y'all take care. God bless y'all.
Bless you all.
Bless you.
God bless everyone.
God bless.